Bhakti Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. We're reading this morning from chapter 5 of the first canto. And this is the chapter entitled Narada's Instructions on Srimad Bhagavatam. So just by way of quick review, what has happened just recently in the Bhagavatam? What is
Vyasadeva expressing his dissatisfaction, even though he's compiled such great literatures.
Yes. So who is the author of Srimad Bhagavatam? So what is a natural thing for an author to do at the beginning of his book? Preface, which explains qualification, but yes, why he's writing the book. What is the purpose of the book? Why he's writing it? So this is what is taking place in this chapter. The background of the Bhagavatam. Before in the seventh chapter, we get into the actual unfolding of the pastime of Bhagavatam. All right, so let's see, 23, if you would please. We'll start with 23. I'd like to start by reading these 7 or 8 translations. So if we can pass the mics around, men's side, ladies' side, take turns. And this will kind of give us the story as it's unfolding before we deal with verse 31 in depth.
O Muni, in the last millennium, I was born as the son of a certain maidservant, engaged in the service of Brahmanas who were following the principles of Vedanta. When they were living together during the 4 months of the rainy season, I was engaged in personal service.
Who is speaking here? Narada Muni, the guru of Vyasadeva. Notice he's referring to him as Muni. He's already appreciating his great qualification.
Although they were partial by nature, the followers of the Vedanta blessed me with their causeless mercy. As far as I was concerned, I was self-controlled and had no attachment for sports, even though I was a boy. In addition, I was not naughty, and I did not speak more than required.
Even soccer. He's just a little boy, 5 years old. Okay. Next.
Once only by their permission, I took the remnants of their food, and by so doing all my sins were at once eradicated. Thus being engaged, I became purified in heart, and at that time the very nature of the transcendentalist became attractive to me.
Yesterday, in that association, and by the mercy of those great Vedantists, I could hear them describe the attractive activities of Lord Krishna, and thus listening attentively, my taste for hearing of the personality of Godhead increased at every step.
O great sage, as soon as I got a taste of the personality of Godhead, my attention to hear the Lord was unflinching. And as my taste developed, I could realize that it was only in my ignorance that I had accepted gross and subtle coverings. For both the Lord and I are transcendental.
Thus, during 2 seasons, the rainy season and autumn, I had the opportunity to hear these great-souled sages constantly chant the unadulterated glories of Lord Hari. As the flow of my devotional service began, the coverings of the mode of passion and ignorance vanished.
I was very much attached to those sages. I was gentle in behavior, and all my sins were eradicated in their service. In my heart, I had strong faith in them. I had subjugated the senses, and I was strictly following them with body and mind.
As they were leaving, those Bhakti Vedantas, who are very kind to poor-hearted souls, instructed me in that most confidential subject which is instructed by the personality of Godhead himself.
By that confidential knowledge, I could understand clearly the influence of the energy of Lord Sri Krishna, the creator, maintainer, and annihilator of everything. By knowing that, one can return to him and personally meet him.
In India, the monsoon season is characterized by heavy rains every day, kind of similar to Gainesville. And during that time, the sages will stay in one place, the sannyasis will stay in one place, Then when the rainy season ends, then they'll go out traveling again. So in this situation, Narada Muni is from a very humble origin. His mother is unmarried. He is just an only child. She's poor, works as a servant. She is taking care of these sannyasis, these sages, during the rainy season. So during that time, Narada is getting this opportunity to just spend time with them. And this, he is explaining to his disciple Vyas, the author of Bhagavatam, is how he became enlightened in Krishna consciousness. Okay. So now, text number 31. Yenaivaham Bhagavato Vasudevasya Vedhasaha Mayanubhavana Vedam Yena Gachanti Tatpadam Yenaivaham Bhagavato Vasudevasya Vedhasaha Mayanubhavam Avidam Yena Gachanti Tatpadam. Christian. Synonyms together, please. Yena, by which, Yena, certainly, I, Bhagavata, the personality of God, Vasudevasya, of virtue, Vedasa, of the supreme Maya, energy, and Bhava, influence, Avinayam, easily understood, Yena, by which, Gachanti, they go, Tatparam, and the mercy of the Lord. And translation together. By conscious knowledge, I can understand clearly the influence of the energy of Lord Shri Krishna in the earth, and knowing that one can return to. Who'd like to read the book?
All right. Purport. By devotional service, or by the most confidential knowledge, one can understand very easily how the different energies of the Lord are working. One part of his energy is manifesting the material world. The other, superior part of his energy is manifesting the spiritual world. And his immediate energy is manifesting the living entities who are serving either of the above-mentioned energies. Living entities serving the material energy are struggling hard for existence and happiness, which is presented to them as illusion. But those in the spiritual energy are placed under the direct service of the Lord in eternal life, complete knowledge, and perpetual bliss.
Okay, let's pause there for a moment. You know when you go to the beach, there's on the beach, and sometimes it's dry and sometimes it's wet. Sometimes solid beneath your feet, sometimes the water's rushing in. So the living entity is like that, like the beach. Sometimes it can be in the spiritual energy, sometimes on the land. And the option is always there to go either direction. So Srila Prabhupada is explaining here, if we choose to go in the material direction, then we suffer. If we choose to go in the spiritual direction, then we can come closer to Krishna and to our true identity. So this marginal energy is one of the three potencies of the Lord. And the superior and vastly greater energy is in the spiritual side. The material energy is just a little island of land, you might say. In this giant ocean of bliss, that is the spiritual energy. Okay. So clear on that? Any discussion, any questions?
We can decide to step either in the water or on the dry side. But what about this comment, like once we get there, we don't come back? How do we think about, like, how does that tie into that analogy?
Right, we always have the option at every stage of our existence to turn to God or turn away from God. But the Gita says that if you have been in Gainesville and you go back to God, the chance is very small that you're going to go back. You always have that option, but very unlikely to. So he says, essentially, one never goes back.
Srila Prabhupada used the word immediate energy to describe like the living entities, the marginal potency, and I was just wondering if you could explain what he meant by that.
Yeah, medium isn't the word. It's
intermediate. Oh, I thought it said immediate.
No, he said, and the via medium energy is manifesting as the living entities. Via. Oh, I see. Not sure which is the version. In any case, the idea is that the living entities can go either way. Intermediate, meaning it is neither the greatest pure spiritual energy nor the completely mundane energy. And we see that most people have the concept, I am this material body. They've totally identified with the mundane energy. So that shows the flexibility of the living being and really go either way. I'm this body and then be an illusion. So, right? Anything else? Let's go on to this.
The Lord desires, as he has directly said in the Bhagavad Gita, that all conditioned souls, rotting in the kingdom of material energy, come back to him by giving up all engagements in the material world. This is the most confidential part of knowledge. But this can be understood only by the pure devotees, who only such devotees enter the kingdom of God to see him personally, to serve him personally. This concrete example is Narada himself, who attained this stage of eternal knowledge and eternal bliss. And the ways and means are open to all, provided one agrees to follow in the footsteps of Sri Narada Muni.
Okay, listen to this next sentence very carefully. Okay.
According to Shruti, the Supreme Lord has unlimited energies without effort by him. And these things are described under the three principal headings as above mentioned.
Ways and means are open to all, provided one agrees to follow the footsteps of Narada Muni. What are the four ways by which one comes to Krishna consciousness? Wanting money, distress. He said that with great emotion. Seeking knowledge and curiosity, right? So, does anyone here feel like you can identify most clearly with one of these four? Again, distress. Knowledge, seeking for knowledge. Most of us have a combination of some of these, but some are some. So knowledge, distress, anyone else? No one came for money. But actually what this means is that one is bereft and has no other option but to turn to God and pray out of desperation. Distress and needing money are very similar. They're in distress, and so you're curious if you could get some money. And then he came and they got knowledge instead.
And he was seeking.
So we have these various motivations, which is so nice to understand, right? Because the life of spirituality, for the living entity to turn to the spiritual energy in this material world is very rare. It's very exceptional, and you're really going against the grain. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks this beautiful verse, Yanisha sarva bhutanam yasyam jagrati bhutani, yasyam, samyami, yasyam jagrati bhutani, sanisha pashito muni. That what is night for everybody is the time of awakening for the self-controlled. And what is night for the self-control is the time of awakening for all living entities. It's very clear to see. Like, and at this hour in the morning, how many people are spending the time studying scripture? Very, very few. Very few would consider that a regular part of the routine. I went to the Episcopalian Center over here some years ago. We used to invite, and I hope we can do that again, invite various leaders from other faith centers around campus to come and speak, to give a class during this time to explain their faith. And so I went to see the nice lady over there who's the minister. I said, would you like to come and speak to our students at the Krishna House? She said, sure, I'd love that. When would it be? I said, 7:30. And she says, a.m.? Yes, Sanisha Sarvabhutanam. This is the time of awakening for us begins with the dawn, before dawn. You know, these hours from 2 to 10 a.m. are in the mode of goodness, from 10 to 6 p.m. are in the mode of passion, 6 p.m. till 2 a.m. is the mode of ignorance. So the more we take advantage, obviously, of these sattvic hours, the more conducive it is for our challenging quest to turn back to the spiritual energy in the material world. One of my godbrothers is giving class in Los Angeles, Tuda Karma Prabhu. The devotee asks him after class, what if the President of the United States became Krishna conscious, how would it be different? And he said, well, he would get up earlier. So the challenge we have is not only the internal difficulty of our own minds and senses being quite accustomed to this material energy, but then to the social support that we don't get by turning to the spiritual energy. Unfortunately, it's such a rare thing. The mass of people is going in another direction. So we really have to stand up and turn around and go in a direction that society is not going to support. Our friends and family are likely not going to support, except those fortunate few who are born in devotee families. As Henry David Thoreau said, let a man march to his own drummer, however different and measured it may be. In other words, to be a well-rounded human being, you need to know what is important to you and follow that. So in this way, he's giving an indication that, yes, even if it's unpopular, if you have a strong inclination, it is your fulfillment in life to follow it. Otherwise, there will always be this sense of lacking. One example is something I've observed for many years, is that if you chant Hare Krishna, you will see the world. It never fails to amaze me if you get to know people locally, how many have very limited travel experience. Right? People have only been out of their state where they were born a few times in their life. Is that hard to relate to for us? Not so much. Jonathan.
Oh, no, I see that joining the Hare Krishna is the first time I went out in Florida.
Yeah. Case in point. And you're just getting started. So it is a very broadening experience to travel and see people in different parts of the world, different countries, different cultures, different environments. When you travel, you come to realize that we in this part of the world are very fortunate. I mean, we are in the upper 5 or 10% of humanity in terms of our facilities, the security, the health availability, the options that we have, the flexibilities that we have, freedoms that we take for granted. They don't exist in many parts of the world. So it's natural in places that are more opulent and free that there's even less interest in turning to the spiritual energy because people have it pretty good. Right? So one of Lord Chaitanya's predecessor, acharyas, Madhavendra Puri, had this beautiful prayer. He said, ever since I have taken to Krishna consciousness, my friends think that I'm crazy. My relatives think I am frustrated. Learned Vedantas, people who know the tradition very well, think that I am misled. Wise philosophers think that I'm very proud, know it all. And the wealthy people think I'm wasting my time. And still, my mind does not budge an inch from the determination to serve the lotus feet of Krishna, even though I'm unable to do it. So that is our existential dilemma. Having made up our minds to turn to the spiritual energy, we're still fighting hard with the mind and senses who have other ideas. In this section of Bhagavatam, we're reading about how Narada Muni, this little boy, has this transformative experience. Does this remind anyone of any other section of the first canto that we read earlier? These descriptions that Narada is giving. He's saying for chapter 2 of the first canto, yes, this divinity and divine service. He says that first by circumstance, just by circumstance, he started to associate with these devotees. And then because I was receptive to hearing from them or learning from them, and I took the remnants of their food, in other words, we had a close association, the idea of becoming a transcendentalist became attractive to me, just by seeing these other transcendentalists. Before that, it appears he had no particular interest. There is a backstory. By the mercy of the sages, I could hear them talking about Krishna. And then I got a taste for hearing this about Krishna. And then I realized that I had been living a life of ignorance. And so seeing this then gave me the full picture of spiritual life. So the idea of the eligibility of the student and the qualification of the teacher are both contained in these short verses. The Vedantists were detached, they were realized, and then they saw this young boy taking a genuine interest, really wanting to hear and really wanting to know about Krishna. And so they said, we'll tell you everything. That is the nature of spiritual knowledge, that it's shared freely. It's not something that is sold. I don't know if anyone has ever taken this particular type of meditation training. When I was 17, I wanted to learn meditation, so I went and I paid a fee, and I was given a mantra and told, this is totally confidential and secret. Don't tell anybody. So I didn't tell anybody, and I chanted it in the way they instructed. It was 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the evening, silently. And then I came for the ceremony. I brought a fruit, gave some money, and then I was a meditator. And so later on, I got the Hare Krishna mantra from Srila Prabhupada. He didn't charge me anything. He didn't give me any stipulations about how and when to chant it. Just chant it as much as possible. And after some time, some of my peers, they said, I took this meditation course. They said, I took that too. I paid $25. I paid that too. I got a secret. I got one too. What was your secret mantra? It turned out it was the same mantra. It's a secret. No. See, I think they had 2 or 3 mantras they gave, which were all from the Gayatri mantra. Kleem and Boer and Bach. It's little pieces of the guy. So the point is that if spiritual knowledge is genuinely capable of shifting this intermediate soul from the material to the spiritual energy, it's given freely. That's one of the symptoms of one who is enjoying spiritual life. It's given without expectation of return, without a fee. It's given because it is pleasing to Krishna, and therefore it is pleasing to the one who's given. And amongst devotees, this discussion about Krishna also becomes very pleasing. So it's very challenging when we first take up Krishna consciousness. There's so many unbelievable, fantastic things we're hearing, right? We're hearing about little Krishna lifting a mountain with his finger and holding it aloft for 7 days without breaking a sweat. And we're hearing now how all these people around him, in spite of this, they can't recognize his divinity. So they think, oh, this poor little boy, let's help him hold up the mountain with our staffs. And they're thinking, isn't Krishna getting tired? But they don't have the capacity to recognize his divinity because they're so much in love with him. And he likes having those relationships, not just fawning, adoration, but he loves to have friends, he loves to have peers, he loves to have superiors, he loves to have parents. He's got all these relationships and he's enjoying. So hearing about these things is even more amazing than X-Men, right? Or any sort of fantasy that somebody can create out of their minds. The Hobbits, Star Wars. It just leaves it in the dust. Nobody could possibly imagine what Krishna does. But even if somebody made it all up, Prabhupada said it's a better way to live. But we may not be able to perceive Krishna's amazing activities by our senses, or understand them, or even believe them. But what we can perceive and understand and believe and experience is that talking about him is enjoyable. As we learn about the pastimes and we talk about them with others, it's blissful. It's so counterintuitive, isn't it? What is everybody's favorite subject in the world? Every single person. Themselves. Yes. Everyone is the world's leading expert on themselves. This is why, by the way, if you ever want to write for Back to Godhead magazine, the easiest way to break in is to write an HIC article. You know what is an HIC? How I came, yeah. You tell your story about how you transitioned from material life to spiritual life. And it always makes fascinating reading. And it's a great way to learn to write because you know the subject so intimately. So the idea of becoming absorbed in someone other than ourselves is something we really have not experienced very much. Yeah, sure, there's Swifties and there's Trumpians or what have you, people whose minds are absorbed in great celebrities. But still, the absorption does not penetrate to the extent that it does when we're connecting this absorption with a personal transformation. Just like Narada Muni is experiencing. He's changing, and he becomes very attached to hearing about Krishna. When we experience that, something else happens too, which is very tangible and experiential, that our attachments for the material energy start atrophying. They start losing their grip on us. These could be very gross, bad habits that we know are bad for us, like smoking cigarettes, all the way to very subtle habits like taking offense easily or being critical of other people. These things all pollute us, grossly or subtly. And when their influence starts waning as a result of hearing about Krishna and talking about Krishna and chanting Krishna's name, it's incredible. It's like nothing else we have ever experienced in our lives. That's the transformation that brings us to the platform of what's called nishta, or firm faith, where nobody could talk us out of Krishna consciousness. Just like Madhavendra Puri. His friends aren't into it, his family's not into it, everyone in society is criticizing him, and still he's, I'm not budging an inch, even though I can't. So that determination, that faith is not something that comes dogmatically. And this is so important to understand. I don't know about you, but in my life, I studied many faiths. I tried very hard to believe in some of them, very hard. I want to be a good follower. And it wasn't happening. It wasn't happening. There was a beautiful article in Back to Godhead years ago by my godbrother, Rabindra Sarup Prabhu. It was called How I Was Saved from Being Saved. So he told a story about how his parents used to send him to a church summer camp. And at the summer camp, every day they'd have their play and their regular activities, but there was also a chapel service. And during the chapel service, the minister would stand up in front of everybody and tell them how bad they were. We know that we've all told lies. We know that we've all stolen. We know that we've all been bad. And here is your chance to be redeemed. And then the organ would start playing this soft, coaxing music. And now everybody bow your head. Now if you're ready to be redeemed of all of your bad things you've done, come forward to the altar. And so these 13-year-old kids, some of them every time would come forward, and then they'd have a special meeting with the pastor, and then he said, for the next few days, they'd have this beatific look on their face. And then pretty much they'd go back to the way they were before. So he said somehow he saw that this looks manipulative, and he never went up to the altar. So that was how he was saved from being saved. He had some sense that spirituality could not be achieved by manipulation or coercion. In other words, if we are turning to spiritual life not out of curiosity or distress or wisdom, but out of fear and out of intimidation and out of threat, that isn't spiritual life. That is, as Marx put it, religion being the opiate of the people. That is, religion being used to control people. And the opiate is the promise of a better life in the future. You may be miserable now, but if you believe, you'll go to heaven where everything is nice. Prabhupada told this interesting story about a preacher going to the coal mines of Sheffield in England. And he was preaching to these coal miners. You should believe and have faith or else you go to hell. And they said, oh, well, what is hell? Oh, hell is very dark and dirty and stink. And they said, well, that's where we go every day. And the minister said, but in hell, there are no newspapers, no internet. Oh, no internet. Oh, I believe. So this promise of a better life in the future is sort of the impetus for people to take to spirituality, which is why people are leaving religion in droves. If you've had the opportunity to travel to Australia, New Zealand, England, much of Europe, you know that religion is old-fashioned. Churches are abandoned or reconverted for other purposes. And as one of my godbrothers in New Zealand put it, even to say the G word, be careful. Don't say the G word. You're introducing Krishna consciousness, be sure not to say God. As soon as you say God, you lost it. So America is still in fact, America is seen by people in these countries as being this fanatically religious country. Just one step below, like Saudi Arabia or whatever. It is happening more slowly, but the same thing is happening here. That more and more people are identifying when they're surveyed. This Pew Foundation, isn't that today? They do regular surveys on religious practice in America. And over the years, the number of people who identify as religious is going down, down, down. And amongst those who do identify as believing in God, their faith is now none. That's the fastest growing category. I have no particular faith. I believe in some spirituality, but I have no particular faith, no association with any religious entity or organization. And why? Because they've just seen so much hypocrisy in these organizations. A lot of it has to do with sexual orientation. Many young people find that aversion to non-binary sexual identification is not tolerated by churches, therefore they reject the church. Because they have friends who are gay or lesbian, and they say, these are nice people, these are my friends, and this church thinks they're going to hell just because of that. I don't buy it. That and other women's rights, another issue, climate denial, another issue. So more and more young people are rejecting conventional faith. And that's, how do you feel about that for devotees? Is that a good or bad thing? Probably good, because faith has been misused by this threat and intimidation. Jackson.
Kind of like breaks up the ice and lets people be more open to receiving something from the preaching sense. It puts people in shambles, and so like it allows for the light of Christian consciousness to pour through.
Because people are not hung up on their particular faith, they can hear it. Like we read this about Narada Muni. Okay, I was receptive, and then I could get this experience. Brad, if you could use a mic, so you're on.
Yeah, so I would say because most people are going spiritual, because I do see that a lot. This is different because it's more of like a spiritual religion. So it's like it's different than all the other religions, whereas they put down other people's religions. They say that they're the ultimate and that anybody else is going to hell, all that kind of stuff. And so in a sense, for the spiritual people, this is like the next best thing, because that's what I was looking for. I became spiritual just like you were just saying there. I didn't follow any faith, but then all of a sudden I met a devotee, and he was a yoga teacher, and then next thing it was like, I'm down to try it out, and it's been great ever since. So.
Now, don't we say as devotees that people who don't practice Krishna consciousness are going to hell? What's the difference? That's the correct answer, but I want to hear Jay. What is this?
I didn't have an answer to that. I just have a question. How is the difference between the threat? How is the difference between the threat of hell different than the threat of samsara?
Because samsara is something we're already experiencing, as Nate has sagaciously pointed out. Yes, we're already in a hellish condition. And that's hard for people to understand or to take or to accept. See.
That if you continue on the path of materialistic ways, then you will continue in samsara instead of going to Godhead. So how is that different than?
Right. The difference is not a threat of something in the future. It's an exposure of something in the present. You see, it's a hellish life if we have to suffer from unwanted things like old age and disease and death. That's a hellish condition. So we're saying here is a positive alternative. If you turn to spiritual life, you become freed of the existence that you're experiencing now.
Or it's a continuation.
Yes. If you don't, you can stay. You see, there's a degree of detachment with that. You have the choice. You can live as you're living now, or you can live in a spiritual way with knowledge and with wisdom. And you have that choice. And if people say, I just want to stay with the Gator football team or whatever, then okay, that's your choice. That's fine. You don't want to hear about Krishna wisdom. Often we see people on campus invite people, give them a book or a flyer or something. What's the 2-word mantra? I'm good. I'm good. They don't even have to take out their earbuds. No, I'm good. See, so there's no threat. We're just trying to help people have a better way of life. That's all. And so that notion of fear and you're really in for it. It's different. It's more compassion. Compassion is driving the devotee. But Brandon's saying we're experiencing a better life. in Krishna consciousness. We're experiencing it. It's not something theoretical. It's not dogmatic. So, of course, any God consciousness allows one to experience a better life. It's not to put down other spiritual paths. It's just we measure our spiritual success by how detached we're becoming from our old life, from our attachments, our habits, our self-defeating behaviors. How detached are we becoming from those things? That's really the bottom line. That's how we measure our progress towards spiritual life. And what drives it is joy. What drives it is taste. What drives it is a new way of enjoying life that we didn't know before. And that just gets sweeter and sweeter. Like Narada is saying, I started hearing and then I started liking it and then I became really attached to it. So this is how spiritual life grows. It doesn't begin with a dogma. Okay, I believe Krishna is God. It begins with a test. Okay, maybe Krishna is God. Let me live as if Krishna is God for a while and then judge the results. That's scientific. That's hypothesis, experiment, conclusion. So then faith comes at that point, as opposed to having to be a prerequisite for following a spiritual path. That makes sense? In other words, believe in my spiritual path and you won't go to hell. Just have faith and you'll avoid hell. But no, believe theoretically and try it out and then decide. That's how this is the difference. See what it's like outside of the samsara. I just have to add one more. I just always remember this. When we talk about hell, I remember Bhakti. Bhakti is Brahmatirtha Prabhu's wife, and very nice devotee and a family therapist. So she said that when she first started coming to the temple, all the devotees were saying, "Oh, you're suffering in the material world." I said, "Oh, what are you talking about? I'm happy. You're your problem." And she got so tired of people telling her that she was suffering that she said, "This is nonsense." So it's not a great way to start introducing someone to Krishna consciousness to say how much they're suffering. It is something we understand in the background, but better to say, hey, come on over, chant, dance, and feast. Have some fun. Try out a different way of enjoying. No threat, just try enjoying. But then when you start enjoying, the danger is you get attached to that enjoyment. And then your material life is finished. There really should be a warning label on the beads. Warning, after chanting for a while, your old habits may not look so fun anymore. Is that all right? Okay. So any other hellish questions before we wrap up?
Proceed at your own risk.
What's that?
Proceed at your own risk.
Yes, proceed at your own risk.
Material.
Got a warning label?
Yeah, material.
Please.
Material discretion advised.
Okay. Very good. So any comments on any of these points? Questions, Stephen? Let's hear from the religious study major. How dogmatic was class today on a scale of 1 to 10?
I just wanted to say a joke from it's like the line from Dante's Inferno, abandon all hope, you who enter here, abandon all hope for material enjoyment. Yes. Who was it in the Chaitanya Church? One of Lord Chaitanya's associates was cursed. No, it was Lord Chaitanya himself, wasn't it? Yes. But when Lord Chaitanya started having the kirtans in the early days of the Sankirtan movement, he had kirtans at the home of his associate Srinivasacharya. And so they're very selective about who could come. And so some of the smarta Brahmins, the puffed up local scholars, were not allowed to come because they had the bad vibe. And so when one of them was disinvited to the kirtan, he cursed Lord Chaitanya. You will never have material enjoyment. Lord Chaitanya said, Haribol. Thank you very much. All right, other comments? Okay. Go ahead, Ryan.
I had a question. Verse 24, he mentions his qualities, that he was self-controlled and he wasn't naughty, didn't speak as more than required. Could you explain a little bit like why is there importance to those qualities, and does it help in our devotional service? Or is it just mentions just to describe his background?
No, it's these are all very favorable qualities. Young boy is by nature innocent. And if they have been brought up with some care and love as he was, then these qualities are naturally there. If there's obedience, if discipline is given with love, then there's obedience. Favorable, not out of intimidation. He was too young and too poor to really spend his time with a lot of frivolous activities that richer kids might have done. Yeah, he was not naughty. He that's one of the beauties Krishna talks about in the 10th canto. Narada Muni. In this, Narada Muni is talking to Nala Kuvera and Manigriva, the two sons of Kuvera. And he tells them, if you have money, that's a big disqualification. If you're rich, you'll have a tendency to enjoy more sense gratification than others. So Narada was very poor. And Narada said to these two sons of Kuvera, you're very fortunate if you're poor, because first of all, you don't have the facility for as much sense gratification. And second, because you're not as much into sense gratification, saintly people will want your association. They like to be with you. See? So Narada had these qualifications, and he's speaking from his own experience. This is Narada's HIC article right here. In general, children are more pliable, soft-hearted, open-minded, open to learn anything. And it's a beautiful thing if you're raising a child, just to see how impressionable they are, and how much you can influence them, and how much you can guide them, and how much they adore you. You enjoy it for a little while because it changes very soon. But children in that stage can be very easily directed in spiritual life. So in the Bible it said, unless you become like a little child, you cannot enter the kingdom of God. So we as devotees also have to become a little vulnerable and childlike in that sense. This is why the spiritual master is emphasized so much, because in academic life we're trained not to follow anyone too closely. Right? You turn in a PhD thesis that says, I just accept everything this person says. That's not going to fly. You have to make, as they say, a new contribution to knowledge. You have to come up with a fresh, steaming speculation. So, actually, to progress in spiritual life, we have to be able to be like a child and say, I am going to accept whatever I am learning from this source. With faith, with trust. Recognizing two things. First, the value of this knowledge, and second, our own limitations, our own inability to resolve our deeper problems. That takes humility. Humility is not a requirement for getting a degree. Character is not taken into consideration. So it is the spiritual life.
When you were speaking about the condition of the modern world and how religion declines, I remembered one of the Russian swamis. He said that I was preaching to this person, and the person at the end said, so what you're saying is, when I die, my soul goes somewhere else. And he concluded that there is two types of people practicing. He said the first type is, I'm the body and I have the soul. And second type, I'm a soul and I have the body. So that line, that there's such a disarray, so many division on almost every subject you pick. There's such a strong emotional division between people. And Krishna consciousness is such a uniting force. Whoever you are, whatever gender, race, doesn't matter. You practice. So you go to a lecture, there's so many different ideas, so many different backgrounds, and yet there's one big uniting force. It's a beautiful thing.
Very nice, very nice. That's what brings diverse people together. this singular notion of I am not this body. Even this great American poet, Emerson, transcendentalist, he wrote that the Occident, the West, is this mysterious part of the world where people think they only have one life. This was in the 1800s. So even then, there was some kind of a foundational notion. It's gone now. All right, anything else? We'll stop there. Oh, last point, Nitai.
This verse. Okay, no worries. So saying that Narada Muni was not naughty, he was not interested in sports. Like, so when people like us, when we go to have kids, we expect that from like children, like them not to like be them to be the examples of Narada Muni and not be interested in sports and only in spiritual life.
Yes. Many a parent has crashed and burned on the rocks of trying to make their children like Narada Muni. Because each soul has to make their own decision. Well, as parents, all we can do is give our children unconditional love. And that can be hard at certain times, and easy at certain times. If we practice Krishna consciousness ourselves, there's more of a likelihood that they will follow. If we're thinking, well, I didn't do it, but I'm going to get this person. I'm going to get this kid to do it. That spoils the relationship, both with the parent and with the spiritual outside. So yeah, ultimately we have to pull our children and not push them. We have to be exemplary teachers and not dogmatists. All right. How about at tantrums? And his father would give us. But not American. All right. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Sadham ki jai.
Of the senses, lusty tongues really can be overcome. The soul is struggling on the surface. So he helps us regain control. Feeling tremendous and he has done. Let us take what he has left, falling loudly, feeling blessed. Krishna, Chaitanya, Nikai,
Are you available for a second? Sure. It's about the Kirtana during the during the Tuesday program.
Oh, yes.
I would apologize for my ignorance.
Oh, no. No.
I was aware of what I was talking
It's so sweet that you. I have a feeling you weren't ready.
Okay.
But
yeah.
And go be organized now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
but you probably should have figured out.
Okay.
And there's no.
Okay.
No, you're good. I'm sure we'll find something else. I think you're on like. Would you? Yeah. He might text you and you can just tell him you're not ready.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm Christian. Yeah. I mean, I'm closer. Yeah.
Yeah. What? Oh, really? Oh, wait, that's when he, but as a boy.
Oh, you the biggest one.
Yeah.
When Army was something
Yeah, oh, the previous slide. The previous slide, I know about his father, but he was a demigod.
Oh,
And he was in the heavenly planets. He was, he was in the ninth council. He was singing, he was in the heavenly planets singing songs in praise of the demigods. Very materialistic. And so somebody cursed him for birth of children. Yeah, you're praising the demigod. Should be glorifying Krishna. You take birth as a son.
I never cursed unless you.
Yes.
Hare Krishna, brother.
See ya.
Good to see you too. That was a really nice class.
Need to disconnect that?
No, it was good all the time. Yeah. Watching the